Hello and welcome to our online Salon series presentation. I'm happy that you've all signed up and are able to come tonight to hear from our presenters. I want to welcome you on behalf of the McDowell Foundation. The foundation funds teacher-led research in the province, such as the projects you're about to see. I would like to start by acknowledging that I'm currently on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Dene, Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, and homeland of the Métis, recognizing the importance of knowledge, truth, and a relationship as key components of reconciliation. I appreciate the honor and honor the relationships with one another that allow us to share this land and continue to work towards reconciliation. I know we have people joining us from other territories, and I hope that you take a minute to consider your own relationship with the land and the people that live, work, and play there. With that, I will throw it to Raquel.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're excited to share a little about our research with you. Before we jump into that, I'm going to introduce Amos MacArthur. So we're really grateful to have Amos here with us tonight. He's an advisor from Pheasant Rump First Nation, and he was involved in our research project for both years. So it's a 2-year project. The first year, he was an online presenter, and then the second year, he really helped us out and became more of an advisor and a co-planner and a facilitator for the second year. So he helped plan our collaborative learning days with White Bear and Pheasant Rump, and he's also supported lots of schools and teachers in Southeast Cornerstone over the last few years. And I'm always grateful for the teachings that he shares. So welcome, Amos. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Amos MacArthur here in Magape, Shoni de Nakota Yate Hektahi. Nakon Zamachino. Nakoni Yau. I just token Yaumbi Waumbuhe. Just quickly just said who I am, where I'm from, and that I'm Lakota. I'm from the Lakota tribe, and I'm beginning. I'm a learner of the language. So, growing up, my late father, Armin MacArthur, he was my mentor, my role model, and I tried to carry on his teachings as best as I can, and whatnot. And it's been one heck of a journey, I tell you. Following his footsteps, and it's been a really, very, really, really tough journey as well, because there's just so much to learn and so much to remember and stuff like that. So, did you want me to start us off with a prayer and right now, and then we can continue on? Okay. So I'm gonna.
If I could just jump back in for a second, I'm so sorry. We had some technical issues, and we've got Whitney Paul Joseph, the local association president for Southeast Cornerstone, here to bring her greetings. Go ahead, Whitney.
Thank you. My name is Whitney Paul Joseph, and I am the president of Southeast Cornerstone Teachers Association. I live, work, teach, and learn on Treaty 2 and Treaty 4 territory. So on behalf of SECTA, I want to congratulate Michael and Raquel and all of the amazing folks that they were able to work with on this incredible journey that they have embarked on throughout this project. So I know you were able to dig deep into the unsettling work of treaty education, helping to educate and advocate not only for those in the Southeast, but across our province and our country. So on behalf of our local Teachers Association, I am honored to say that I get to work alongside you as colleagues, and I look forward to hearing about your journey tonight. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Whitney. And I'll send it to Raquel and Michael for presentation.
All right. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for all the people that have signed in and registered to join us, as well as our research participants. I see a few of them on the line already. So our research that we were looking into, we entitled this presentation, Educators Doing the Deep Unsettling Work of Treaty Education. And hopefully by the end of what we're going to say, you'll have an idea on what we're meaning by that deep unsettling work. So when we start off, we have a little bit about us. One of the first things we noticed when we started this project back in our first year and continuing into our second year, that it was very important for us to recognize not only where we currently are, but where we come from. So that being said, as an addition to our treaty land acknowledgement that we've already had, I'm going to go forth and acknowledge that I was born in Treaty 11 territory, but I spent most of my life growing up in the Robinson Superior Treaty lands. I've also lived in the Williams Treaty lands, as well as Treaty 9, 8, and of course, most recently residing here in Weyburn on Treaty 4 lands.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I'm going to do a little intro in the language as well. In Nakota, something I've been learning. So, ha ampawashte midagabi, Raquel imagiabi, Weyburn wati, daya wachimnaga. So I just said, hello, it's a good day, my relatives. My name is Raquel. I live in Weyburn, and it's good to see you. I actually can't see anyone except Mike, so I'm just imagining all of you, and I see your names, so I know you're here. I identify as a white settler woman. My pronouns are she, her. My ancestors are from Poland, Ukraine area, Belgium, France, and Ireland. So the reason I introduced myself in Nakota is because I want to honor the communities and the people that I'm working with by learning a few words and phrases. So that's just a little intro. It's a starting point, but people really appreciate it when you can greet them in the language and say "ambawashte." So I grew up in Treaty 4 territory, and I'm really grateful for the hills I climbed as a kid at Katepa Lake, the Souris River here in Weyburn that goes to Riverside Park. That's where I walk my dog most days, so that's kind of when I can connect with the land. So thank you for starting us off with the land acknowledgement, Adam, and thank you, Amos, for the opening prayer. And yeah, we're excited to share a little bit about our research with all of you.
Just a little bit of an overview on what we're going to talk about. We're going to start off with some of the information about just our research project in general, looking at our research questions. And because this turned into a 2-year project, we actually kind of itemized some stuff that we did over the course of the first year as well as the second year, looking at some of our research methods and some of the data that we've collected and began to code and go through. And then kind of a little bit of a breakdown on the who that we're actually participating in all of our research. And then we have a little bit of a thematic analysis looking at some of our results that we have gleaned so far, and then some of the things that are bubbling up to the surface about factors that definitely impacted our research, as well as future avenues for research. And then, of course, our thank you and acknowledgements.
Okay, so these were our research questions for the 2 years. And these questions helped us get to the deep work of treaty education, focusing on our identities, relationships, and responsibilities. We'll just pause here for a second. You can read them. Okay, Mike, I think that's good. Okay, so the first year, all our learning days were online due to COVID-19. So we hosted 3.5 collaborative learning days on Teams for participants, and we brought in Indigenous and non-Indigenous presenters to share their knowledge and experiences on a variety of topics, including disrupting settler stories, understanding residential school experiences, cultural connectedness, Nakota language and land-based learning, Métis identity and community-based learning, and more. So you can see them all on the screen there. We hosted these on Teams, and participants had opportunities to listen, ask questions, and then have discussions in breakout rooms. So the topics that are on the screen here, some of them were like a 1-hour session and some of them were a half day. It just depended on what worked for that presenter and how much time they needed. So these were our amazing presenters for the sessions. We tried to bring in as many people from our local First Nations communities as possible. So Ocean Man, Pheasant Rump, and White Bear. We also had some presenters from the University of Regina and SUNTEP, the Saskatchewan Urban Native Teachers Education Program. Since these were hosted through Teams, we were still trying to create kind of a relational community the best we could in an online format. So we invited all the past and potential presenters from the first year to attend all 3.5 sessions throughout the school year. So even if they weren't presenting at that session, we still always welcomed them to come onto Teams and listen and share their thoughts. And we had a couple presenters who actually attended almost every session and really enriched the experience by adding their perspectives.
And so when we finished up year 1 and began year 2, we were excited because some of the COVID-19 restrictions were calming down a little bit. And so we tried to start off in a really good way. We had a ceremonial sweat with one of the elders that we worked with, Peter Bigstone. Participants were invited to attend this, but as it was an additional evening event, we didn't have all of our participants able to join for one reason or another. It was still a very welcome event for those who were in attendance, and heard nothing but positive things from our people starting off our second year in that good way. So when we got into our actual collaboration days, we tried to organize the year around partnerships and relationships to be developed. Some of the relationships that were developed in the first year and continuing on with those, but also trying to make sure that we are including our local First Nation communities and partners in some of the work that we were doing. So when we were looking at that, we actually, Southeast Cornerstone, our homeschool division, has very close connections with 3 particular First Nation communities. So we tried to spend a day with each of these communities, connecting to some of their local elders, knowledge keepers, community members, and so forth. And our first day was spent with an educator and professional dog sledder connected with White Bear First Nation. It was a very unstructured day, lots of free time for our participants to mingle with each other, with the other participants, with the local elders, the local community members that were in attendance. It was also the first opportunity in the course of these 2 years for all of our participants to actually see each other face to face. So it was a blustery February afternoon or morning when we first got together. Our spirits were high. Participants were provided with a formalized learning experience with the dog sledding, but also those opportunities to connect and talk with the knowledge keepers and elders and other participants. Our second day, we connected with Ocean Man First Nation. In particularly, we connected with Ocean Man School. We collaborated with the elders as well as the rest of the school staff at a day of traditional teachings, learnings, games with our participants, again, community members. We had a couple of students, a drumming group in attendance, as well as the teaching staff from Ocean Man School themselves. The ability to work hand in hand with those educators from the nation really helped develop some collaborative relationships that we were looking to cultivate within this research project. Our last day brought us to the medicine wheel on Pheasant Rump First Nation. And we do have a little bit of an overview on what the medicine wheel is in just a little bit. But we had opportunities for our participants to tour this sacred space and learn alongside community members and elders and knowledge keepers. We had small group facilitated sessions highlighting the day inside some teepees that we actually had our participants raise as part of their learning for the day. And then in this upcoming video, you're actually going to be able to see what this medicine wheel that I alluded to looks like. The spokes of this physical structure align with where the sun rises on the summer solstice and winter solstice, and they actually capture the longest and shortest days of the year. It's a really amazing archaeological site that shows, as Elder Amos MacArthur would have put it, that the Nakota people were actually really good astronomers. And I'm just going to start this video, and it just gives you a little bit of an overview of some of our celebrations for the day. One thing that I like to point out and look at is take a look at the look on all of our participants and all of our facilitators' faces as they are going through some of these pictures and videos.
So it started to run down. Yeah, but listen, I'm tough. Like over and fucking popular. Why not deal with it? Let's.
Yeah.
Okay, getting into some of our research methods and data collection. So we had these collaborative learning days, but those were opportunities for our participants to grow. We actually focused our data collection using a mixed method sort of data collection, but we looked really much at we really focused on our qualitative results that we were receiving from some of our interview transcripts with our participants. We did have a series of interviews over the course of the 2 years, 4 interviews in total, as well as several small focus groups at the conclusion of the research project itself. All those interview transcripts are currently being thematically analyzed for themes and pulling out some of that rich data and quotes from some of our participants. We did collect some quantitative data, mostly self-reported confidence levels, but again, the best data that we're getting out of all of our results so far is definitely from those qualitative interview transcripts with our participants. So when we talk about having 2 years of research participants and spending a lot of time going through this data, it's kind of important to take a look at the number of people that we actually had participating in this. So when we started off with 13 teachers and 4 principals that were interested. They expressed their interest to participate in this research. And then we opened it up to some non-teaching staff, some of our counselors and community education liaisons and consultants within the school division requested to take part in some of the learning activities and wanting to be as opening and forthcoming for anyone who wanted to participate. We worked with the school division to make sure that we could pull some of those people in as well. In the end, we had, in the first year, we had 12 teachers, 4 administrators, 4 of those external people, as well as Raquel and myself, for a total of 22 research participants. In our second year, we allowed some of these participants to return and continue with the research if they wished, but we also welcomed having some new participants So in the end, for year 2, we actually had 13 teachers, 3 administrators, 5 of those consultants and counselor kind of people, as well as the 2 research participants. In the end, we had, I believe it was 13 of the participants that actually returned for both of the years. So we had a pretty good overlap and some really good long-term collected data from our participants. We look at where these are coming from, and again, this is more looking at where our participants were based out of for their local school. We kind of covered the entire southeast corner. Like, we have all the way down in Caryville, which is almost on the Manitoba and US border, all the way going up into Yellowgrass, which is one of the other far reaches of our school division. We had members from some of our First Nation schools as well as we even had one of our participants who actually moved out of our school division and continued doing this project when they took on a job in another school division. So that was kind of nice to have a wide variety of participants from all across our school division and a little bit beyond as well.
All right, so these were some of the recurring themes from participant interviews. So these initial findings we're sharing tonight, they come mainly from our analysis of the final focus groups that happened at the end of year 2. So I'll go into each theme in a bit more detail and share a summary of the data and some participant quotes that highlight the theme. Okay, so the first theme is self-learning and personal growth. So initially, many of our participants shared anxiety and fear about making mistakes or offending someone when teaching Indigenous content and perspectives and the treaty outcomes in their classrooms. Many participants told us that they didn't learn this content in their own secondary and post-secondary experiences, so they were either learning alongside their students or feeling some hesitation and anxiety because, again, they didn't want to mess it up. Participants reported that the learning days made them more aware of gaps in their knowledge, particularly after online sessions about Métis identity, the role of the Métis in treaty making, and the Indian Act. So people were kind of like, wow, I didn't know how much I didn't know. So making them aware of what those gaps were and where they needed to do some more learning. Another theme of the participant responses was that the online and in-person PD sessions helped them grow not only as educators, but as people. So they found it to be this kind of holistic experience for them. During year 1 and 2 of the project, many of our white settler educator participants identified some form of disconnection or lack of knowledge about their ancestry, roots, and cultures. And some of them started to question this lack of connection, like why they don't have that connection or why they've never really felt a desire to be more connected to their ancestors or where they come from or figure out some more of those family stories. So you'll see that in the participant quotes that come next. So I'll just give you a moment to read this quote. This one actually comes from Tammy, who's here as a panelist tonight and agreed to go by her real name. So I'll pause and let you read it. So kind of wrestling with her, she's never thought about learning German, and then kind of saying, why don't I? Why don't I have that desire? You can go to the next one, Mike. And then this participant was reflecting on a session we had about disrupting settler stories. So we heard about the effects of the Indian Act from Elder Pete and Principal Murray Bird from Ocean Man in an online session. And then we read this short article by Sheila McLean called We Built a Life from Nothing. So I'll pause now and let you read the quote. So she's just speaking there to the humility we need to have, and that little chart on the right just shows sorry, Mike, thanks. That little chart on the right just shows like the privileges and policies that benefited white settlers while completely violating Indigenous rights. So that's kind of just to give some context of what this participant was reflecting on. Okay, the next recurring theme was that in year 2, so this is the in-person collaborative learning days, participants really felt immersed in Indigenous ways of teaching and learning. The learning days were relaxed and flexible. Participants commented that these days were just really a good chance to slow down and breathe and just go with the flow. And some of them really enjoyed that, and some of them at first found that difficult because they were just used to their fast-paced teaching life, and it was kind of new for them at first to really have PD that didn't feel like so structured, and just to be able to kind of relax and enjoy the days. The learning days were experiential, hands-on, and land-based learning activities. So dog sledding, playing moccasin game and hand games, teepee raising, for example. So highly engaging and immersive experiences. Many participants said this kind of lit a fire within them to try to provide those same kinds of experiences for students because they were so engaged in the day and they knew that their students also would be. Participants found the small groups really effective for getting to know people and having organic, informal conversations and being able to ask questions in a smaller setting. It also allowed for reciprocal connections to happen. So lots of people said in the first year with those online sessions, they said, I knew who the facilitators were. I saw them on my screen. I heard them talk, but they didn't really know who I was, or I'm not sure if they even saw my face or that they would recognize me because there was, 25 of us, and on Zoom, it's really hard to see everyone. So the small groups in person were much better for relationship building. Several participants brought up how impactful their first sweat was for them, being immersed in the culture and the spirituality of the experience. Others talked about feeling a strong connection to land, especially at the pheasant rump day up at the medicine wheel. A lot of people talked about that. And then the last point that came up over and over was that participants were really just blown away by the generosity, openness, acceptance, non-judgment, and inclusiveness of the Indigenous facilitators that we had. They said they were warm, they were welcoming, they were open to questions. A lot of times they were inviting us to other community events, other ceremony. And so they really created a safe space for participants, and that was much appreciated. So here's another quote, and this one speaks to that kind of how the way we planned the day, we really tried to reflect, or we drew on the knowledge of our elders and knowledge keepers that were presenting, and we tried to kind of structure the days in a way where we were learning in Indigenous ways. So I'll let you read that. So I just like I like Alora's last line there. I feel like that was really impactful with building the relationships with communities because we're learning the way that they learn. And this one, a quote by Ron, who's also here tonight. Just the generosity of spirit that these people have shown to have conversations with us and be willing to share their knowledge and their learning and their traditions and their customs and their spirituality and their teachings with us, like, blows my mind. I'm actually incredibly humbled by it. And that, it was hard to choose quotes for that one because there were so many people who had that same message and said it in such a kind of grateful, profound way. So, okay, so another huge theme that came up over and over was building connections, relationships, and community. So some of the presenters, as Mike mentioned, that we had for the online sessions in the first year came back in person in the second year. And then throughout the 3 in-person learning days, we had some of the same elders and knowledge keepers come back multiple times. A few actually were involved in all 3 days. So participants felt strongly that having those same facilitators come back made a big difference. It built familiarity, it allowed them to get to know people better and build stronger connections. And then focusing on local people was also really important because it helped us kind of build our school division community and kind of make people more familiar with local resources and people that they could reach out to. These informal moments and conversations, people just talked about how that really helped build relationships, kind of the structure of the day and just being able to have those side conversations. A lot of people mentioned sharing meals together was really powerful for that, just having time to visit and tell stories. Another bonus was that our participants really became a support network for each other. So they talked about making friendships, being able to reach out to each other, and having this kind of team or network across the school division that they could lean on and reach out to each other. Another sub-theme was the importance of this role of a connector who had a prior relationship and trust established. So some of the participants mentioned that me, as one of the planners, having prior relationships with the facilitators helped them trust our group because they already knew and trusted me. But for me, Amos was, in lots of cases, the connector who kind of helped me build some of those relationships. For example, introducing me to his auntie and uncle, Kem and Dorothy Joya, who then became my go-to people that helped me all the time and also were involved in many of the days. So we think that's kind of a cool piece there, but an important piece to have someone with that kind of prior relationship that can help connect. And then lastly, participants talked about the need to maintain and care for these relationships to ensure they stay strong. Okay, I will just pause and let you read this quote. It's just about connection and building relationship. And I just picked that picture because that was the dog sledding day. We also got to go snowshoeing and we were all just having fun together. So that was a good relationship picture. Okay. So treaty responsibilities was something that we kept coming back to almost every interview from the first year all the way till the end of the second year. We really wanted ourselves and our participants to think about, as educators, what are our treaty responsibilities? How can we uphold treaty relationships in a good way? And so that was like something we kept coming back to. And these are people's answers kind of towards the end. And some people found, like, by the end of the project, like they had these like big answers at the start of the project. Like, I want to read all these books and do all this learning. And I they have this big list of things that they thought were treaty responsibilities. And then some people by the end of the project were like, you know what, now I don't even know anymore. Like, almost kind of going back to that. Like, I've learned so much, but now I'm kind of resetting what I think, because my mind's been blown and now I need more time to reflect. That kind of came up. But these are a few of them that came up multiple times. So many of these connect with some of the other recurring themes, the idea of having reciprocal relationships, showing up and taking up invitations when we're invited, and trying to contribute in some small way. Like I always say, I'd rather be a little bit late and have coffee with me or KFC or food or something to bring. And then people also talked about creating those invitations. So inviting Indigenous facilitators into the schools to create those opportunities for students, listening more than we talk and holding space for others, following each community's teachings and protocols and being respectful of those, modeling and sharing what's been shared with you. And then a few people were saying, we're in kind of a unique position right now as educators where we can like treaty outcomes and reconciliation and everything is really being pushed to the forefront. So we have this opportunity to really take on these challenges and try to pave the way to make this easier for educators in the future. And just one quote here about treaty relationships. And along with what our treaty relationships are, we really reflected on what it means to us to be treaty relatives, treaty neighbors, treaty relatives, using that kind of language to help us think about what that role is. And you can see here, Allison talks about how sometimes it's scary to show up to new things, trying to face if there's some unknowns or it's something you've never done before, people going to their first sweat. It is outside of people's comfort zone. So it can be hard for people to show up, but she just says here, you need to be brave. She's reminding herself, create those connections and show up and encourage other people to do the same. Okay, the last thing here that we found was that our participants stressed that this PD had holistic and not linear impacts. So many of them talked about sharing their learning day experiences with their family members, students, colleagues, even their CrossFit buddies. In one case, educators talked about the power of being able to speak from firsthand experience and share their stories and pictures with their class. They said students could just see their excitement when they came back, and then the teachers were able to kind of naturally connect those stories into what they were teaching. By the end of the project, many participants felt more confident asking elders and knowledge keepers for help, asking questions, and reaching out to people to plan future events for their schools. And honestly, I can't even keep track of all the school events that have come from relationships built during this project. Estevan had a field trip to Elder Pete's house at Ocean Man. Legacy Park in Weyburn brought students to Ocean Man Powwow. Fillmore had a school-wide Indigenous Learning Day. Manor had a land-based learning day at Saskary. And a lot of those events were planned by participants of this group. Like, they were kind of the leaders. And then they reached out to elders and knowledge keepers who were part of this project to come and support those events and learning days. So that's been really cool. Even just last week or 2 weeks ago, or last week, we had dog sledding in 3 of our schools. And again, lots of those same people being involved. So it's cool to see that now we're having those experiences for students and not just for the teachers. Some participants felt more confident reaching out to Indigenous parents and supporting other teachers in their school, kind of stepping up as leaders or at least support people in their school. Some people did share specific impacts on their teaching practice, such as using more circle talks, more oral teaching, using the medicine wheel, listening to one of the facilitators' lullaby CD. It's Nakota lullabies, so they would play that in their class and their students just loved it. Playing hand games in class. But most of them emphasize how it's just really hard to measure the impacts because they were organic, natural, happened through conversations, and are still happening through these relationships. Oh yeah, I really like this quote. It's kind of long, but I'll just highlight a couple of things. Joe was talking about, like, we teach who we are, as teachers. We teach from ourselves and our identity. So she said, this PD changed who I am and what I am. And in this sense, I think it's been quite profound. Since it's changed me, it's probably changed my teaching as well. And then she kind of goes on to say, maybe that's the secret. We're challenged to be ourselves, to really think about what our identity and what that means. And then at the end, she says, I don't think this has to change our teaching practice. It has to change us. I think that's what Indigenous people need, is for us to be changed, like settlers to be changed, to kind of wake up to our responsibilities. And then one more, John just talks about how this is really can't be compared to a PD that's more traditional, like unit planning, lesson planning, because it's all about building relationships and connecting with others.
Okay, so as Raquel went through all of our themes that we're seeing in all of our research, and you can kind of hear in the explanation she was giving, there's a lot of interconnectedness between our different themes. So we were trying to come up with some sort of a schematic diagram that might describe how you might move from one way to another. We initially started to look at it as almost like a progression of growth. And then we realized that at each stage you might be at, you can actually go and start circling back to a previous stage, or you might skip a stage and go ahead. So when we started to look at how all the interconnections were starting to work, we realized that that 4 of our themes that we were coming out actually have almost like a sequential thing that you can kind of walk your way through, whether you're starting off with just self-learning and then moving into some experiential relationship building, understanding what your responsibilities might be. You can also slide backwards with those. But the really neat part about the interconnections is all those holistic impacts that Raquel outlined in the last few slides. That's kind of like a muddy space where you can actually go and do a lot of the work and make a lot of those interconnections, because some of your treaty responsibilities might actually be in relation to the connections and communities and relationships that you're building. But also some of your treaty relationships might actually be towards your own personal or self-growth. And some of those Indigenous ways of knowing might actually help you understand your treaty responsibilities, which might lead you down another pathway. So it's kind of a nice place where our participants can actually, we could see through their interviews and their comments that they're in that interplay between all these different themes and that were going on. And it'll be very interesting to go and see as we continue to work our way through the rest of the interview transcripts, just exactly where these all are going to line up. So this is just our initial framework idea on how we're seeing these interconnections. So when we start talking about the factors that impacted the research, there was 3 big things that we kind of noticed. Of course, COVID-19 had a very large impact. Our first year of this research was actually approved a couple of months into the pandemic. So we had applied beforehand, and then we found out that, we were able to go forward with this in April or May. Ellen can correct me on the exact days when we find out. But I do remember virtually over Teams talking to Raquel saying, how are we going to do this thing that we were planning on doing in person? How are we going to ever be able to handle doing this online? And we hemmed and hawed and decided that, we would give it a try regardless. Talking to some of our facilitators and our advisors saying, well, you can still do it. And in the back of my mind, I keep thinking back to some of the speakers that I've heard at various conferences where when you talk about reconciliation, the most important thing is to just start somewhere and start doing something. And so not wanting to go and come up with another reason to delay some of the good work that we could do, we worked around COVID-19. Because we were working around that and we were forced to do some virtual teaching, virtual collaboration sessions, we did have that little interplay of online versus in-person learning. And although all of our participants at the end of the first year were able to say, we were hesitant about doing this all virtually, the idea that we were able to actually go through this and start making some of those connections, it was a benefit in the long run. And then the fact that we used a lot of the same facilitators and we had them all come back and we had so many recurring participants in year 2 just kind of strengthened those bonds that we made. And of course, once we got into year 2 and we were talking about going outside and doing some land-based learning, we always knew we might be impacted by weather. Our first day when we were out dog sledding, it was cold and we had people dressed up, but we just accommodated that as best we could. We had a fire pit and a warming shack, and it turned out to be a pretty good day in the end. Of course, with our other 2 days, we weren't necessarily as worried about snow, but there was still one very overcast day in Ocean Man when the wind was biting and it was cold, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do a teepee raising with the winds as high as they were. And then, of course, when we got into Pheasant Rump, I distinctly remember like an afternoon sun shower with the rain coming down while we were out doing some learning inside some of the teepees and tents that we had set up. And it was kind of nice to be out in nature and actually experience that little brief piece of nature as we were working our way through that day. So there were impacts on our research, but not necessarily all negative impacts. No, Raquel's talked a little bit about some potential ways that we might look at some student impacts for future study. So one of the biggest things that we thought about, and we're now a year completely away from the work that we were doing in this, like the actual research, we've been doing our analysis since then. We like to look back after a number of years and see where some of these teachers are at. Are they at a place where they're back to self-learning or back at the beginning? Or have they maintained some of the connections and relationships that they've cherished and built through this process? Of course, we're interested in looking at the impact on actual teaching practice and student learning. And this was very much a teacher professional growth, teacher self-efficacy, teacher understanding, self-growth. So we'd like to see how this is going to make its way into the hands of the students in the classroom. We've started to see some of that with just by being able to observe some of the events and things going on in schools. And then we started to look at some of the bigger details or some of the hard details within some of the research itself. We had participants recognize that we had a lot of work working with our Nakota partners, but we didn't really talk about a lot of other First Nation groups. We knew that we were fairly low on having a lot of Métis impact. That's based on our local construct, but it would be nice to go and have some relationships being built, whether it's with those from Batoche or the Red River Colony. I know that there's some Métis Nation of Saskatchewan offices within our school division area, and maybe having some of them come in and join might have changed some of the impact radius that we would have had. And of course, when we start looking at everything, we do that eagle eye view. Looking back at year 2, I know we've had a lot of positive experiences. We've had those connections made, the relationships built. When we compare year 2 to year 1 had a much more, I'm calling it a somber tone, because we were online and it was very much trying to unsettle our participants so they can reflect on where they came from and what has got them where they currently are, what the relationships currently are, what the work have they already done. So we're just not sure whether or not we've actually pushed people enough going into year 2, knowing that we focused year 2 more on relationships and kind of building those connections and collaborations with our local communities. And our last slide is just our thank you stuff. So of course we have the McDowell Foundation, who provided a lot of the funding for us to bring all of these teachers together. We have our local school division, who allowed this number of staff members to take time out of their days. They provided some additional sub coverage for us. Of course, our First Nation partners, we have White Bear First Nation, Pheasant Run First Nation, as well as Ocean Man. Without their assistance, guidance, even just providing access and ideas for who we can connect with within their communities, getting those knowledge keepers, elders, and other facilitators from these communities. We couldn't have asked for a more awesome group of individuals to work with. We do have our 26 participants that have helped us all along the way, given us lots of feedback and guidance, and been willing participants. And of course, we've had several research advisors that we've reached out to over the years to make sure that we were kind of on the right track, knowing what we were looking at with our data and kind of where we can go to next. Just wanted to throw a thank you out there.
All right. Tanche Kiowa, Bonsoir, Angie Karen Deshinakashan, and Michifnia, Saskatoon Doshchin. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Angie Karen. I am Michif from here in Saskatoon. That's not my ancestral community, but that's where I am right now. So, I have been asked to moderate this discussion that's going to occur as a result of the research that was just presented. So thank you, Michael and Raquel, for sharing all your wonderful work. And Kishim R.C. Amos for starting us off with a prayer that always sets a good tone for the work that we're going to do together. I would like to ask, there's a few panelists involved in this discussion and this question and answer period. So I would like to ask the panelists who've been asked to be a panelist to introduce yourselves as well, please.
I'll go first, Ron, okay? My name is Tammy Ponabenikoff, and I teach at the Estevan Comprehensive School. I'm an English teacher. I have lived in Southeast Saskatchewan my whole life, and I am a settler in Treaty 4 territory. I was a participant for 2 years, so I was there for the whole ride.
Okay, I apologize. I lost my connection there temporarily. I'm back. I'm assuming we're introducing ourselves. Is that what's happening, Tammy? Okay. Hi, my name's Ron Wardrope. I'm the principal in our COLA school. I'm a white settler. Our COLA school serves and works with Pheasant Rump Nakota First Nation.
All right. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. I think right now I'm just going to ask that if you have questions for the panelists, for the researchers, could you please just type them into the chat? If you feel like it's a really long question and you'd rather turn on your mic and ask the question verbally, that's okay too. But you can always type the questions in the chat, and I'll try and sort of look at what is happening in the chat and present that to the panelists. So when I was asked to moderate this, Adam said to me, Angie, you're a moderator and you're also a panelist. So I'll try and figure out, which role I'm taking on at which moment. So I'll do the best I can with both of those roles. So, it really says something. So I'm just going to say a few words here while we're waiting for people to get their questions into the chat. It really says a lot, I think, about the research and the interest in the work that has been done here with your elders, your knowledge keepers, the community, all of the participants. When you got 41 people on a Wednesday night in March, because we know March in schools is never good. And so when that happens, I think we are seeing some evidence that this is an area of interest to people. And so I think this research is something definitely that can inform work going forward. And I think you've really set kind of a nice path for people to, if they wanted to start in this work, what would it look like? And that real focus that you took on, I think, connecting with your communities, the communities that you serve, your surrounding communities, knowing that, yes, you are both, as researchers, white settlers, the participants were primarily such, and that you knew that the knowledge lived in, with the Indigenous, the First Nations folks that you worked with in the communities. And so I think that that's a really important point about this research, is that you went to those that know, right? That lived experience is an important thing. Yeah. So I haven't gotten any questions in the chat yet, but I do have a couple here. So I'm going to put a question out to the panelists and just see who wants to jump in on this. So one of the questions that I have for you is, what was the impetus for this work now? So why now? What kind of got you going with this right now?
I can go first with that. Well, how it all started here was my late father. He was invited to speak to a group with the Southeast Cornerstone School Division, and we were gonna set up some. We were in the stages of setting up a presentation or a talk, and I was kind of his technical guy there, and from the time he first spoke, or from the time we first set it up, he had left, and made his journey to the other side, and so from there, I was asked if I could be the one to speak and share some of the teachings that I had, and at first I was very, very, how would I say, very. Well, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure if I was going to do it or not, because of myself. The one thing I didn't really pick up was the language. I never really picked that up. I had moved away from my community when I was about 16, 17. Going to school in a different community where they didn't teach Nakota, or there were no Nakota speakers, and and then I went to university. Then I became in a more professional career. Again, same thing. There was no cultural or whatever or language teachings, but I did hang on to the ceremonies and stuff like that. I would reach out to my father and other relatives and participate in these ceremonies and stuff like that. So I hung on to stuff like that, and so then I thought about it for a while, and then I haven't I accepted that role and responsibility, and never turned back, and it's been a good ride, because it gets me to remember things, to go visit my elders, to go visit my knowledge keepers, to listen to recordings that I have of my father, and so when someone asks me something, I want to be prepared and to try to give them the best answer that I know. But if I don't know that answer, then, or if I don't know the question, then usually I'll go out and I'll seek that answer and try to get back to that individual. So that's kind of how I started.
Thanks, Amos. Yeah. I can jump in next. I work for the school division as a instructional coach for treaty education. And when I first started in this role, I was kind of told there's not a lot of elders in our area. There's not a lot of knowledge keepers. We don't really have too many connections. And we had connections with Elder Pete Bigstone from Ocean Men. So when I first started, Mike took me out and we went and visited Pete. That was before I even started, the year. It was kind of, I think, May, June of when I was still teaching, before I moved into this role. And so we went and saw Elder Pete and talked with him. But really, I felt like when I was starting in this role, a lot of schools were just feeling like there's no one we can reach out to. The school division used to employ an elder, and that hasn't happened for a while. And it felt like no one knew people really in the communities. And then, except for a few, there was pockets, right? So certain schools. So I started just talking to the community education liaisons and the principals and people who kind of knew the communities better, and they started saying some names. So when we started this project, really why we started it was because I was like, there are people, there have to be people. Look at these communities around us. And so we just really wanted to connect and see who was willing to support the schools and who we could build relationship with. And some of it came from the people that we did know and people kind of giving names, and then it was sort of cold calling off the start. I know I called, I was trying to call Elder Armand, and I ended up talking to Amos, and then he said, we were setting up that first session, and then it ended up being more like a tribute to Elder Armand after he had passed. But it was kind of like a snowball effect. As soon as we started finding people and connecting with people, they would give us another name or say, maybe you should reach out to this person. And now I feel like we have this whole little network and community. And a lot of that is because of the really good people we connected with at the start, like Amos, JR, and then they kind of helped us get connected with others in the area. So much gratitude for helping us do this work. And we wouldn't have been able to do it without the partnerships and like they said, that connector role of kind of people that trusted us and then allowed us to connect with others.
I'll jump in before Tammy or Ron try to jump in. and it's I'm going to take it back to before Raquel even had this role. I remember being at one of the education leadership unit at the U of S, one of their PD sessions that they put on. And I remember listening to Pete Chief talking, so the principal in Saskatoon Public Schools. And he's the person that I remember. I can still hear his voice saying, just start, just do something. And so I remember being in that session, and it was that fall that we started to have the discussions at the school division level saying, you know, maybe we need to have some sort of a coach or a consultant or something to help facilitate some of these treaty teaching, so make some connections with our First Nation partners and stuff like that. So that after my own learning, after hearing Pete Chief talk, and then going a year trying to figure out how this might work within our school division, do we connect with an elder? Do we have an educator? How is that going to work? And then when Raquel got into the role, that those first few interactions that I remember having with Pete, like I remember we went to Pete's house for an hour visit, and 6 hours later we were still leaving, or we still hadn't left yet. And it was just an awesome experience to see the interplay of two settler people interacting with an elder, and it was just a calm and cool and collected. I remember being so nervous about how to, like, we were trying to offer tobacco, and I didn't know how he wanted tobacco to be offered, because I know that there's some personal stuff that you should be taken into consideration. And I remember I offered tobacco, and then he walked through exactly how he would like it in the future. It was the best learning experience. So I thought, well, if this is such a great learning experience for Raquel and I to be sitting here with this elder and learning all this stuff in our hour or 6 hour conversation that we had, wouldn't this be good to kind of scale out and see how other people would interact? Because it was a big learning experience. That one day was the biggest learning experience for myself. And I was surprised with that, because I spent the first part of my teaching career actually teaching on reserve in First Nation communities, but yet I'm still learning, and I'm actually learning so much more, just interacting this much more closely in a very unstructured setting. And that's kind of the key thing that came out of it. When you have a formalized structure where you're sitting down to have a meeting with someone, it's very different than when you're sitting at a picnic table in their backyard just talking about the way the things were or the way the things should be. We had a tour of his sweat lodge that he had there, and it was just a great experience. And that's kind of what provided some of the impetus for where I felt we needed to kind of get some more traction, more momentum going. And we had willing community members that were willing to work with our staff. So it was a win-win.
Okay, I'll jump in from a participant perspective. So just echoing some of what Raquel and Michael already said, but we, before Raquel was in this role, we had a professional learning community where we were looking at the treaty education outcomes, looking at incorporating, reconciliation into our classrooms and teaching Indigenous ways of knowing. And it was a bunch of teachers from our school division sitting in a room with the sort of end goal of making recommendations to our school division about how can we do this and how can we support our teachers in this, because as it has been mentioned, a lot of our teachers were saying, we want to do this, but we just don't feel comfortable. And so that was like a real moment, I think, for a lot of us to look around and think, okay, but why aren't we making connections with these communities that we have in our school division when we're making recommendations to our school division about this? And that's, like Raquel said, a lot of us were like, we don't have those connections. We wish we did, but we don't have them. It would be so nice if we could make them, but how do we do that? And so that was like a sort of a circular conversation. We all wanted that, but we didn't know what to do. And so then Raquel moved into her role the next year, and then it sort of snowballed from there. But there was a lot of, I think, interest in the staff of our school division and teachers making these connections to our local communities to help us learn as educators, because we all felt that we just didn't have enough knowledge, maybe, especially those of us that have been teaching for a longer time. Raquel is like this go-get-em first-year teacher who just came out of university and had all this like fresh, wonderful knowledge and had worked sort of like in some of these projects in university, and like myself, having taught for 15 plus years, I was like jealous. Oh man, I wish I would have done that in university, but we didn't have those connections. We didn't have the knowledge. We wanted them, but we didn't know what to do next. And so this was like so exciting. We just jumped at it. I would love to do this, of course. And yeah, it turned out to be as good as we thought it would be.
My answer to your question would probably be much shorter, but just when I heard about the opportunity, I mean, any given year in my school, 15 to 20% of our students are Indigenous. And I mean, I just thought you'd be foolish not to jump on an opportunity like this when I heard about what Raquel and Mike were putting together. So that's why I jumped on board. And I think, I had another teacher from my school who jumped on board and was part of the project for 2 years. And it's made I think like an incredible difference in our school and the relationships that have formed there and with our pheasant round partners.
All right. Thank you to all of you for responding to that question. I do have a comment, not so much a question in the chat. I have been kind of monitoring to see if there were hands up and that sort of thing, but I do have a comment. So here's a comment from Ted. Ted says that I have no question, but I have great admiration for your research. I appreciate the comments of embracing an expanded view of professionalism and practice that includes humility and building trusting relationships with communities. Thanks for sharing. Well done. So this resonates with folks for sure. Another question I guess I have for you as panelists is, so when you think about this authenticity that you went at this with, that focus on ensuring that, you were hearing from the community folks themselves, those that hold the knowledge. So that focus, how has that experience in both developing and nurturing those relationships, how has that experience changed the way that you view or the way that you embody reconciliation?
I'll jump in because I actually did think about this. I told you I wasn't prepared, Raquel, but I actually did think about this more. I mean, I just think this is reconciliation. And I think that goes back to what I said earlier about this group of teachers that we were talking about. I guess our own personal passion for pursuing reconciliation and then sharing that and teaching it with our students. But modeling is a big part of teaching. And so how do you model it to your students if you're not doing it yourself, right? So community and relationships, that's it. To me, that's it. Like, you can say what you want. And as teachers, we have a very, personally, I think in some ways, easy reconciliation role in that we have these students in front of us. What we have to do is teach it. But I really like that quote that you included, Raquel, about maybe let's not think about it so much. Let's just change as people, which this experience did for us. And then because we are people in front of people, we share that experience with our students, and there's no way it can't come across. The relationships are it, in my opinion. So, just even knowing Amos, like, hey, Amos, can you come out to our school? Like, we know him and he has, and that has enriched mine and my students' experience like exponentially since building those relationships. So
yeah, I 100% agree with what Tammy said. I actually thought about this question a little bit too before tonight. And I just J.R. MacArthur is somebody that I've gotten to know a little bit over the last couple of years, partly through this experience. And JR always talks with his hands, right? Like Amos and Raquel, and maybe others on the call will know what I'm talking about. But maybe it was something, a conversation I had with JR when we were at the sweat at Kim and Dorothy's. But, you know, he said like there's seeing or knowledge, which isn't unimportant. So, you know, you can learn some things from books, you know, about residential schools or truth and reconciliation or treaties, or you can learn some things through experiences like we had with the McDowell Project. And those aren't necessarily, you know, unvaluable, but it's the heart, or it's the connections with people and the connections with the land. That's what's really life changing. So just agreeing with what Tammy said. The other kind of thought that I was reflecting on a little bit today, thinking about tonight is, and one of the comments Raquel made on one of her slides made me think of this too, that, you know, there's like, there's ignorance, where maybe we still have a lot of people in society who are in some stage or form of that. And then there's, you know, you can pass into this area of awareness. And I think that's what a lot of teachers were speaking to when we started this research project, and we're doing the interviews with Raquel and Mike. But the awareness stage, it's like you just kind of maybe feel overwhelmed, or you just realize how much you don't know. And so there's probably a lot of insecurity there. But then you can move past that and you can move into relationship with people. And I think that's where the value is. And I think that was certainly the experience for the majority of the participants in the project.
I'll throw something in, but I'm also going to add it in the beginning that I think Raquel actually taught me some of the stuff that I'm going to talk about. When we were talking about the path of reconciliation, I know that part of that is, again, some sort of action, some sort of doing something. But one of the things that I picked up on really early, and I don't know whether it came directly from Raquel or from Raquel through Amos or Pete or something, but it's the reciprocal action. So looking at, okay, we're getting this out of these teachings, learning from our elders, learning from these community members. But then there's also a back channel where there should be some sort of reciprocal benefit for the people that we're learning from. And it's not the benefit can't just be, we're learning from you, therefore we have knowledge that we can share and better educate people. But there's got to be that reciprocal thing. And I was struggling with where that would fit until our last actual learning day. I ended up having a meeting I got called into. So I got there late. And so as I got there late, one of the facilitators from one of our sessions was actually walking up the hill, and she looked around, and then she sat down to facilitate one of our small learning sessions. So I sat down with her, and the first thing she said was, I never thought that this day would come. And so the four of us were sitting there just watching. She's like, I didn't think that I would walk up the hill and see all these white settlers working hand in hand with First Nation people, and it not being like a one-way street, but it was that friendship, that relationship back and forth. And so I felt like there was actually some sort of reciprocalness happening, where the realization that there is some action and reconciliation that's going to be happening, like that's the start of everything. So that was like the first. I was actually concerned. I knew that our teachers were getting lots out of it. I knew I was getting lots out of it, but in the back of my mind, I knew that in order for this to be a true, any sort of true reconciliation action, there had to be something else, something for our First Nation partners, for our neighbors, for the people that are giving so much, continually giving so much. We needed to make sure that we were giving back something to them. And it was nothing tangible. It was just that feeling of, hey, we've gotten over this rock, and now there's more work being done, and that's a positive thing, a positive outlook that came out.
Yeah, I think the importance of reciprocal relationships is huge. Like, we're not just taking and learning and, we're giving back in some way. And that's what I mean by contributing, like showing up, but not just showing up with something. It could be food, it could be especially like the ceremony foods. That's what I've been learning as a way to help. Like, yeah, well, KFC is really good too. People get very excited if you show up with that. But like the berries that people need for ceremonies, or like having the certain foods that are supposed to be there, that can be really stressful for people when they have so much other stuff there, like just life, right? And they have all these obligations. So if that's what I'm like, okay, how can I really help something that's like taking weight off someone else, or like bring all the paper plates and bowls and stuff because I'm in Weyburn and people don't have easy access to that stuff for, like things like that. But it could also be like sharing your gifts. So like, like helping with a website or live stream, like, anything that you can do that's helpful to events, I think is huge. And I think that's something, like, I feel so lucky in my role because we planned these like 3 days across the school year, and it felt so impactful for people, and they got to do these things. But that's like I get to do that stuff all the time in my role, like helping with events and being with people. And it's become, for me, like what you said, Angie, about how has this changed how you embody reconciliation. Like, to me, it's like I have this little family that's really taken me under their wing and wants to teach me, and I feel so grateful to learn from them. And I'm always trying to figure out, like, sometimes it does feel one-sided, like they just want me to learn and they want me to have all these experiences, and they're so generous, and I'm always trying to figure out, like, how can I give back and contribute and be helpful and not just take. But I do feel like really grateful to have that little family network. And we can be over at Kim and Dorothy's prepping stuff for a hide workshop, and we're just all cutting hide and like all prepping together and laughing, talking, eating. It's just it's really nice. It's really supportive community.
So I know that we want to stick, very close to the time frame here. So I do want to make sure that, you've talked lots about those reciprocal relationships. And Sheena, I know you have a question in the Q&A, so I'm hoping that maybe Raquel and Michael can look at that, because it's a specific question to Raquel and Michael. So I'm going to ask you to kind of take a look in the Q&A and see if you can respond to Sheena's question. But Amos, I'm wondering, they've talked lots about the, idea of, they're getting so much from these relationships, and that they really believe in that importance of, giving back and that reciprocal relationship. So if you had to kind of give some folks some advice, what would you say is the, what can folks do to kind of balance out that? Because as your community, you've been giving so much to these folks, and I'm sure you've already given them this, this advice. But for those that are on the call here, what can folks do when they develop those relationships with their First Nations or Métis community partners? What can they do to kind of give back so that it's not one-sided?
Well, from what I had learned over the years, I was a police officer for many years, and, myself, I worked in 11, 12 different Indigenous communities, and, and with my father, with his talks and everything else, you'd always say that if you're gonna work with a community, whether it's First Nation or non-First Nation, the biggest thing you could do is just go and get involved. Just go and learn the ways that things should be done with that local community. I have had some talks where an instructor or a teacher was going to bring in some information and wanted to teach to the local kids. And when I looked at this information, it didn't really gear towards the location of what they were trying to teach. And for the area. And so I had a discussion with this person, and I said, I'm happy you're doing your best to bring in this Indigenous information, but it's also good to get to know your surrounding and who your audience is, because you might get some some people that would be offended or might brush you off. And as a visitor to that community, if that happens to you, sometimes that might stop your learning, or might stop from you wanting to do what you're doing, to kind of take the wind out of your sails. And but we had a good discussion, and this person said, well, thanks for bringing that up with me and stuff like that. So I think the best thing that could ever happen was watching my dad over the years. He took in a lot of non-Indigenous people, and he taught them things, and because they did the work, they came out and they learned from him, and that was enough to to kind of give back, as you say. And if someone wants to learn something, a lot, especially non-Indigenous people to a community, when they go into and they're putting that effort, they're going to get a lot of support from those individuals, no matter whatever community it is. Because, like I said, in the RCMP, I always got involved in those communities, because it paid off huge for me. Because at the end, if I wanted to do something very positive, just my work being involved in the community paid off, and people would be very happy to help me, right? And that's something that I share, is that if you're gonna work in this profession, get to know the local communities and who you're with, whether it's a Indigenous community or Métis or whoever, non-Indigenous. You get to know that community, and that's how you kind of give back. Like, you show the community members you're willing to learn, and not just bringing in things to say, hey, this is what I'm gonna teach you. That won't really fly too much. You'll get people to say, yeah, we're not going to learn from you today. We'll go to the next person, and we'll learn from them, or we'll help them. So that's kind of a little brief thing, information regarding your question.
Thank you. So that is kind of where we're at the tail end. I'm going to turn it over to Adam here in a moment to just kind of wrap things up. He's got a few things to say. There's some really good comments in the chat, so have a look in the chat if you haven't been kind of following that. So thank you all for being so generous with your time, with your knowledge, with your experiences this evening. And I know it's been a great evening for me. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Angie, and thank you, everyone. I'm unfortunately here to play wet blanket on the really interesting conversation that we've been having. But I want to thank everyone for attending tonight and taking some time out of your evening to support the McDowell Foundation and their researchers and participants that took part in this project. The mission of the McDowell Foundation is to enrich teaching and learning by supporting teacher research. The foundation supports teachers asking questions, taking on challenges, and learning and growing the profession. We are pleased to have been able to provide the space for these conversations and hope they continue into staff rooms, living rooms, boardrooms, and all the other places decisions around education are occurring. Thank you to Raquel, Michael, Amos, Tammy, and Ron for sharing your knowledge and experience, and Angie and Whitney for your support and leadership. And thank you to Jay, Debbie, Rosemary, and Ellen for make sure everything runs smoothly. The foundation exists because we believe in the professionalism of teachers and need to ensure that good research comes from all of us, not from external places and spaces. Thank you to our many donors, including the STF, that allows us to ensure teacher voice and teacher experience continue to lead this conversation. For more information on any of the Dell projects or to donate to the foundation, visit our website, which I'll put in the chat now. And thank you all again for being here. That's all we have planned. I guess keep an eye out for a May Salon series. So watch your mailboxes for an invitation to that. Thanks again.